celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life with Stirling Faux on AM650.
Welcome back to the program. We're talking boating here with our guest from BoatingBC in studio, President Don Prittie from Canoe Cove Marina in Victoria, and one of the 8 directors of BoatingBC, Ian MacPherson, is with us tonight from Nanaimo Yacht Charters and Sailing School and Stones Boatyard. Both our guests joining us from the island. Great to have you guys with us, and long overdue conversation about boating, and great timing here in late April to get at it finally. Don, we were talking a little bit before the break about the economics of boating and power boats versus sailboats and all the rest of it. But you had a bit of a story that you shared with us during the break. I'd appreciate it, at the risk of repeating yourself, to share it with our listeners as well, because this speaks, I think, volumes to the cost of boating. And was the fellow that you're about to tell us, was he a sailor or a powerboat guy?
No, he was a powerboat gentleman. And,
okay.
As I was saying, I think we all spend money doing something recreationally, and boating is one opportunity, and we, of course, believe it's a very great opportunity in British Columbia. So this gentleman was in his mid-80s, and he came into my office one day, and he said, "I'm here to pay my final bill." And I think he was paying for his electricity on his boat or something like that.
Okay. And this is at a marina?
This is at a marina.
Okay.
And he didn't have a smile on his face or anything. He just came in and he said, "I've had this boat in the same berth in this marina for 42 years. And he said, over the time, I've spent many, many dollars on boating."
Right.
And then he smiled, and he got this great big smile on his face, and he said, "And I've got millions of dollars in memories."
Right.
So
irreplaceable. Huh?
Yeah. So that's it's the cost benefit. There are some costs, of course.
Of course.
But the benefits. And, as I grew up and my family out on our boat for family vacations every year, 5 kids and a dog and mom and dad, jammed on a little boat. We went all over this coast.
Right.
And, and Ian mentioned Princess Louisa Inlet a few minutes ago.
Right.
Well, we took a trip to Princess Louisa Inlet in about 1964. I ended up volunteering there at a kids' camp. Then I ended up running the ship that took the kids to the camp. And then ultimately my wife and I ran the camp for 13 years. So, boating is a big part of our life, and it gets in your blood. But it all started from a family vacation.
Right, right. And that's, Ian, we've come back to it again. Boating is an activity that it's certainly not only about families, but it really is great for families, isn't it?
Absolutely. And for those that find that sailing may be a little slow or mundane, they can go out racing. And there's a huge buzz in doing that. And there's lots of yacht clubs looking for young and eager crew to jump on board and go sailing with them.
Do we still have the Swift Shore race around the island every spring?
Absolutely. It's coming up in May, and it's an event that we're involved with in Victoria. Great sailboat race, very well organized, and they have, I think, 4 different categories of races, and the biggest one being out around the Swift Shore Bank.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's a spectacular race, and it draws people from all up and down the coast, and of course Vancouver, Victoria, Seattle. But we had boats from Hawaii last year and California, and I think 1 European boat. So
interesting stuff. And of course, Ian, and I'm sure you watch these America's Cups races with the boats are just amazing. The multi-million-dollar boats with every bell and whistle you can imagine, and yet it still takes a dozen incredibly fit humans to make that multi-million-dollar thing go anywhere, doesn't it?
It does indeed. That's not the case for every sailboat, of course, but
they're big boats.
They're big boats. They're high-end. They're sailing faster than they should sail,
yeah.
And they seem largely out of control at times. But so there's an activity in sailing for everybody.
Is our Boomer? This is Boomer Life, and suppose now we've got somebody listening to us and we talked about this earlier. It's just on the cusp of realizing all of a sudden I'm at that point in my life where I've got a little bit more time on my hands. I've earned it. And now I plan to enjoy it. So I'm going to make a little investment here and do the RV or do the boat or do something. And you're right, Don. Well, any activity costs money. There's very little you can do for nothing out there and have the kind of enjoyment level that you want. is there?
No, that's right. But again, with boating, it's a wide open field. So, my next door neighbor goes kayaking. He's part of a kayak club, and he's out. In fact, he went out this morning because I saw his kayak on the roof of his car as I left. He goes out every Wednesday with this club, and it's very, very affordable. And yet he's in the nature and getting exercise,
right,
and being with a group of people that he really enjoys.
Right. So again, so there's no such thing as too late to the party, is there, Ian?
Never.
This is Boomer Life, and a lot of people are going, well, that boating thing sounds like fun, especially when that chap talks about going up to the exotic spots that he takes his charter guests to. But gosh, it seems like an awful lot of work, and I don't know whether I'm up to it or not. It's not all that difficult, is it?
No. And I think that the fear of the unknown is more prevalent as you get older. You become more cautious. All I can say to you is take a chance.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have done this, and it's inconceivable not to be out in this beautiful cruising area on a boat, even at our wonderful age of being in the Boomer Gap there. And I think we should seize the bull by the horns, or the tiller of the yacht, and get busy.
Right. I wanted to ask you back to your the boating license thing, the Pleasure Craft Operator card. When you take this test, there's a rudimentary knowledge of all things boating required to be demonstrated. Is there any evaluation, Don, of swimming competency associated with getting a boating license?
No, there is not. The expectation is that you boat with proper safety equipment at all times,
mm-hmm.
and we are encouraging, it's not mandatory, but we encourage people to wear their life jackets or personal flotation devices
right.
all the time when boating.
Right.
And that's just good common sense. But from the standpoint of having to demonstrate your ability to swim, no, that's not part of it.
Okay, the other thing that I've heard from people by way, Ian, and you're the sailor particularly here to speak to this, and we've talked about the difference between freshwater boating and saltwater boating. I would think the biggest difference would be weather. We can whistle up in pretty short order some pretty ferocious weather on the Strait of Georgia. Not that the lakes aren't capable of some pretty rough action as well, but here on the Salt Chuck, it can get pretty topsy-turvy pretty quickly, can't it?
Yes, it can, and we're very, very well serviced with weather information on the VHF. We got 10 channels, of which most of them are broadcast either in French or in English and up to date, brought to you every 4 hours, the latest update.
Okay.
There is no reason to go out there and get hammered because you should have that information.
All right. So, and again, this is part of the learning process, I would imagine. If you want to become a power boater, in addition to having your basic license, operator's license, there's a whole lot of other learning that goes on to move up to the next step. Ian, Don has talked about some of the sailing steps and the certificates you can receive. What about on the power boat side? As one, if you want to buy a boat, you're going to have to learn to operate the darn thing, especially if the most you've ever done is, have someone pull you around on a pair of water skis behind one of those little guys, and all of a sudden you're on something you can sleep on. That's a different game, isn't it?
It is a different game, and there's lots of resources out there for us, for people who are starting out. The Power Squadron is one. Canadian Power Squadron will take you through courses and teach you about all the safe aspects and navigation on a boat. You can hire a trainer,
mm-hmm.
and they'll take you out on your boat.
As Ian was suggesting, you could do and combine it into a vacation.
Sure, and that person will, teach you how to dock a boat or, what to do on your checklist in advance and all that. And there are other great resources available. Pacific Yachting Magazine here, published here in BC. Just last issue was a great article on weather and reading weather forecasts and things like that.
Right.
So there are great resources available to novices and anybody wanting to learn about boating safely in BC.
And again, speaking to boomers directly, Ian, as we have been on this program, if you are sort of thinking and leaning and all, and yet you're hesitant to go with the boating, to make the jump to the boating lifestyle because you've never done it before, even though you can afford it and it looks awfully darn exciting, you just don't know enough to feel confident about taking the step. But as Don said, it's not you're not going fumbling around in the dark very long. There are lots of people to help you along.
indeed, there are a lot of learning institutions and teaching institutions rather that will take people that have never done it before from zero to hero, as we call it.
Okay.
So you could start as a competent crew and rattle through those courses, and you will be a better boater than probably some people who have been doing it all their lives.
Interesting. Don, do people buy boats and then learn to operate them, or is it usually the reverse? They're experienced boaters and they're just upgrading from a little one to a larger one?
Well, there's some of both.
Okay.
There are many people that will decide that they're going to get into boating and go and buy the boat that they think will be their lifelong boat.
Okay.
And it may be larger than they've ever been on before or operated. There are other people that start small and then they move up gradually. We used to call it 2-foot-itis, but sometimes people will start with a ski boat, for instance, and then they want to get into something that they can sleep on or take the family out for a picnic on or whatever. There's all kinds of people out there, and they'll do different things based on their experience and what they see as their end game.
I would think cautiously, again, thinking older consumers here, Ian, that the tendency would be to, if anything, undersize rather than oversize when you're getting into it. You don't want too much boat when you don't know very much about boating, do you?
That would be the logical thing, but I have to tell you, on Tuesday this week, we had an elderly couple on a 40-foot powerboat, and they were crashing and bashing into just about everything that was within a safe radius of them.
Oh, is that right? A little too much boat, huh?
When they came too close to us, we were working on a boat, I got one of my lads, who's an instructor for the sailing school, to jump on board, and in 10 minutes he taught them more than they had ever learnt in docking this boat. It was their first boat. They'd done just what you've been talking about. They went out and bought too much boat, their first boat, and didn't have a clue. It's not necessary. The training is inexpensive, and seriously, you could end up as a very competent boater in a short order and really be out in the water enjoying yourself.
Right. Okay. So it's April here, Don. So if we were to get into the boating thing, if we were to just go out and acquire a boat, and really starting from scratch. I mean, most of us have at least been for a boat ride at some point in our lives. The smile. He was raised on boats. But most of us, other people, have been at least on a few boat rides. So we're kind of familiar. But, if we started in April and we wanted to enjoy the summer of 2014 out there on the water, doing our own thing with reasonable level of competence and confidence, how long would that take before we could go away for a weekend under our own steam, completely in control?
Well, it doesn't need to take that long, as Ian has indicated. I think, if the person wanted to purchase a boat, there are resources available to figure out what kind of boat that suits you to go after.
Right.
And then, again, probably if you're wanting to do it in a fairly short period of time, one of the logical ways would be to just hire somebody to do personal training.
Okay.
Get your PCOC, of course, but then get some personal training. And it would only take, 2 or 3 days. It really doesn't take that long for somebody to get comfortable handling their boat. And then they'll grow into some of the other things like, what other resources are out there from the standpoint of weather or, how to find out more about maintenance and things like that.
Right. But it's not the daunting task that it may seem from the couch.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Our guests are from BoatingBC are Don Prittie and Ian MacPherson here on Boomer Life on AM650. Time for another quick break. We'll be right back after this.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on AM 650.